Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Retro Wrestling. I'm your host, Gene Jackson. And this week, we've got another review show happening. We are going to be talking about an episode of Portland Wrestling from January 21st, 1989. And to do that, I'm welcoming back to the show. You saw him here recently reviewing a show of World Organization Wrestling from Pensacola, Florida. Welcome back, my buddy, Steve Plezing. Steve, how you doing, man?
What is up, Genie Bikini? What's happening, dude?
Oh, I don't know when this is going to drop exactly. Probably this coming Saturday. So, but as we record this, it's New Year's Day, actually.
Hell yeah! Did you make a resolutions?
I did actually. I resolved that I was going to follow through and not let things go like I've done in the past with other things that you're aware of, comedy and characters and different shit. And so we're going to see these through. Now, since you mentioned that, I'll just go ahead and say it here at the top of the show instead of at the end. That being said, this show, Retro Wrestling, for a few weeks or maybe 3 or 4 months is going to become a monthly show instead of a weekly show because I've got a big project that I'm working on that I can't go into now. I can't discuss it, but I promise you it's going to be really cool. People, if you're a retro wrestling fan, if you like old wrestling enough that you're watching this show or listening to this show and you want to hear me and Steve talk about an old Portland show, then you're going to like what I'm going to be working on, and it's going to provide a lot of content on the other side once we get done. And so can't wait till I can tell everybody about it, but trust me, it'll be worth the wait. But yeah, this show is going to drop back to being a monthly show, but I'm going to keep putting stuff on the channel. I'm still going to be putting up old wrestling on the channel as frequently as possible. Maybe not every day like I have been, but we're going to keep it going. Still going to be putting stuff up on the Patreon. USWA podcast is still going to be every week. Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert Tommy RIch still going to be every week. So we're not going away. We're just got something big we're working on. Steve, what is your resolution for 2025? I know you got one.
I'm going to try to lose some weight. Stop drinking so much.
Okay. You going to stop getting high?
Maybe.
I was expecting you to go, no, dude, I can't do all of that at once.
Yeah, I like that too much. I'm into it. It's my thing.
You got to have
my hobby.
Right? Exactly. Some people golf. Some people fish and hunt. Some people play tennis. Steve gets high and watches like YouTube and shit, right? That's kind of
I love it. I did cocaine for like 2 years, but it was only to learn the metric system, and then I had to knock it off.
Well, being able to quit, that's there's something to be said for that.
What's been going on in your world? Bunch of wrestling,
man. Haven't been to any wrestling, but a bunch of watching wrestling, reading books. Man, I've been studying up on a bunch of old stuff. Been reading a book about Don Fargo right now. It's been really interesting. I read a book about the old Mississippi wrestling territory. Of course, I grew up in Mississippi, and I was involved in that in the late 90s into the 2000s. And so read the book by Gil Culkin, The Mississippi Wrestling Territory. Is very interesting. Read another book, Mississippi Wrestling History, by a guy that I actually interviewed on this show a year or two ago. And it was good. So eventually I plan to do some interviews with some people related to old school Mississippi wrestling. Reading those books and studying on that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of Frankie Kane, a guy he was one of the Infernos back in the day. He was the Great Mephisto, but he was a hell of a booker. He's a guy who got blackballed from wrestling because he punched out Roy Shire out in California, that promoter out there. Tried to screw him on a payoff, and Frankie knocked him out, got blackballed from wrestling, but eventually he got back in Australia, and then he got into the Mississippi territory. He did a lot of booking down there, drew him a lot of money, and he has got a book coming out with Scott Teal later this month, and I'm really excited about reading. I've listened to some shoot interviews with him. He has a really, really wild backstory from a kid straight up through wrestling, so highly recommend that. It's not out yet. And also this, The Hard Way about Don Fargo, which is another Scott Teal book. You can get it over at crowbarpress.com. That's a free plug. We're not getting paid for that, but it's just just letting you know, because Scott's a good guy and he puts out some good books. And Don Fargo is another guy who had a wild life. And, I discovered that there's not a book about Jackie Fargo, which amazes me. Like, somebody needs to do that, right? I mean, if we got a book about Don, we definitely need a book about Jackie.
Jackie Fargo. Is there a book about Bockwinkel?
I don't believe there is. I don't think there is. So
that would be cool to read.
You think, oh man, there's books on everybody, but there's some key ones that need to be done. So
also Australia. Didn't a lot of stuff happen over in Australia that they don't talk about? Like, didn't Crockett have something going on over there at one time?
Well, Jim Barnett was about to be possibly go to jail. He was about to get busted on some things, and he fled to Australia and started a promotion over there. And so a lot of guys like Ron Fuller and lots of guys would go over there and work and make good money. And it lasted for quite a while. Eventually he came back to the States, but I don't think he was the one booking this territory that Frankie Kane went to, though. I think this was someone else. I'll have to learn more about it when that book comes out. But anyway, before we get too far off topic here, we're going to be talking about an episode of Portland Wrestling from 1989. Now, I grew up in Mississippi. I know you were in Alabama. We didn't have access to Portland Wrestling. I bought every magazine I could get my hands on, read them cover to cover. And so I remember reading about Portland Wrestling, but I never got to see it until, in the 2000s when I started tape trading. I finally got to see some of it, but I still haven't watched a lot of it. We watched this separately recently, but was this the first episode of Portland Wrestling you'd ever seen, or had you already checked some out at some point?
I checked some out here and there, but I didn't watch any Portland wrestling until I was in the late 2000s. Like, I was in my 30s maybe before I knew about it, and I think it was from like hearing about Raven and people like that, people from Monday Night.
Raven, he did some fun stuff there as Scotty the Body. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But so Pacific Northwest Wrestling, more commonly just referred to as Portland Wrestling, was owned and founded by Herb Owen in 1925, who eventually sold it to his son, Don Owen. And that's the person most people associate with the territory, especially people our age. Don Owen ran that territory from 1942 to 1992, when the promotion finally shut down, as all the territories eventually did. But it was one of the last holdouts alongside Memphis. But Portland not only fell victim to a down cycle in business around that time, and of course, the national companies like WWF and WCW coming in and running their towns, but also due to the relentless regulatory practices of the Oregon State Athletic Commission, which, we've experienced some of that in Alabama and Mississippi as well. But that's what helped drive them out of business, because it was so expensive to pay the commission, and they were up their ass and had all these strict policies they upheld. And if they didn't follow them, they were there to try to fine them and just tax the shit out of them. So I don't know about you. I'm not a fan of athletic commissions. Where are you at on athletic commission?
I don't like the athletic commission. I think it's a scam. I think it's
a money grab.
Taking money.
Everybody's got to have a wrestling license, but have you ever seen an athletic commissioner ask anybody for any proof that they've been trained, that they've had any health exams, anything? Your prerequisite to getting a wrestling license, at least in Mississippi and Alabama, if you got $25, yeah, here you go. You're a wrestler. That's it. And to me, that's a fucking money grab. If you're not there to ensure that somebody's trained or in the proper health to do, like to do boxers and fighters and things like that, then you're just there to take people's money. You're not offering any kind of service for the state or for the wrestling. So it's a freaking scam. But there were some smaller scale promotions that came along after Pacific Northwest Wrestling shut down, but they were the biggest promotion. So in the time frame of today's episode that we're reviewing, we're in January of 1989. A gentleman by the name of Don Koss was the host of the Portland Wrestling television program. Len Denton, better known as the Grappler, was booking the territory. And they had a pretty good mix of like young stars and veterans. They had veterans like Billy Jack Haynes, Colonel Debeers, who was Ed Wiskowski, who did quite a few gimmicks in Portland over the years and throughout the country. Playboy Buddy Rose, David Sierra was there as the babyface Top Gun. Most other places you saw him as like the Cuban assassin Fidel Sierra, but here he's wearing a mask. He's coming out to fucking Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins. It's fun. And of course, Roddy Piper was there as well as Denton himself. Then they had all the young talent who was just starting out, like Scott Levy, who would go on to be Raven, Steve Dahl, Art Barr, who we'll see a lot of in this episode, C.W. Bergstrom, who here's just a young baby face, but over in 1993 on our USWA show is a high school principal character in Memphis in 93. So kind of strange to see how we got there. And a young guy named Scott Peterson, who I'm kind of curious if he's related to Tom Peterson, who apparently owned all the airtime here. Like every time this show had commercials in it, and every time it went to commercial break, Tom Peterson, he was like a big a part of Portland wrestling over the years as any of the wrestlers. Like he was a big part of Portland wrestling. That's kind of amusing to me, but we'll talk more about all those guys we just mentioned as we move on through the show. So the show opened with the host, Don Koss, coming to us from the House of Action, a.k.a. the Portland Sports Arena. He's sitting at a desk with the Pacific Northwest Tag Team title belt sitting in front of him. And he lets us know, Steve, that these belts have been held up, and tonight they will be on the line as the Grappler and Playboy Buddy Rose are going to be taking on the Southern Rockers. Out of that bunch, I doubt you've seen a lot of the Southern Rockers, but I imagine you're a little bit familiar with Playboy Buddy Rose and the Grappler, right?
Yeah. I remember them. I thought it was funny at the beginning because he says that the next week, if you stay after everything's over, the Grappler is going to work out in the ring. And I wonder if they're just, if anybody ever showed up or whatever, or what his workout after the show entailed.
Well, it seems like kind of an offhand comment when they say it the first time, but as we move through the show, at some point he's challenging that Carl Styles guy to work out with him after the show, and then eventually Piper ends up getting challenged to work out with him after the show. We'll talk more about that when we get there, but yeah, it was a very odd thing to mention right off the rip, because yeah, he's here tonight competing for the tag team titles, but next Saturday night after the show, he's going to be in there working out with people. Like, what are we like? I don't know. Like, you never heard that. Like, you weren't going to watch, even on Memphis, you weren't like, hey, Jerry Lawler is going to be in the ring working out with people after the show. Stick around. But Len Denton, he's a talented guy. I've seen a lot of his career. I've had the opportunity to interview him on Doug Gilbert's show, and he's got just a ton of stories. You really can't name a promotion that Len Denton didn't compete in, either as the Grappler or as a Dirty White Boy or Len Denton. One of those characters wrestled there. So in the opening match, we see the Latin lover Al Madril taking on the Pacific Northwest champion Top Gun, who I mentioned is Cuban assassin Fidel Sierra, working under a mask as a babyface, coming out to Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins, which gets me a copyright warning on every episode of this shit I upload to YouTube. I like both of these guys. I've always been a fan of Madril for some reason, but Madril isn't exactly in his prime here. Let's be honest. Not knocking him or the match, but there were some spots that was just, I don't know, felt like they were a little slow or a little off timing wise. I mean, what did you think? Am I being overly critical, or did you feel the same way?
No, I didn't like it either. I for some reason, Top Gun kept reminding me of Boogie Woogie. Jimmy Ballant. You remember when they put Jimmy Ballant in the mask in Georgia? And
Charlie Brown from out of town.
Yeah, I don't know. It just looked like some ripoff. And the other dude reminded me like of a bootleg Manny Fernandez or something.
Madril's an entertaining guy if you get to hear him on the mic and everything. He didn't really get featured in this episode in that way, but me and Bob Anderson recently reviewed an episode of Texas All-Star where he was like co-host of the show, and he had a match, and he was all over the show, and he's pretty funny. But this match here didn't really feature him, so to speak. But it was a decent enough match. Top Gun gets the win with the crossbody off the top rope.
Did you catch the referee at all? Who looks like also a bootleg Jim Ross and counted with both arms.
Yeah.
He did one with one arm, the two with another arm, and then hit back the three with his with the first arm.
Freaking back and forth. Can you imagine some of these Alabama referees trying to be coordinated to go back and forth? Like, Troy trying to count with both arms. But
have you ever had an Alabama referee catch you on three? Just catch me on the third one. Come on, bro. And they can't do it. They can't make it happen.
No, they cannot. But you know, now that you mention it, yes, that referee did look like Jim Ross. I didn't think about it at the time when I was watching him, but that's a very good call there.
Well, when I first watched it, I was smoking, and then I was like, "Is that Jim Ross?" And then I was like, "Man, this is way too late to be Jim Ross."
You're like, I forgot all about when Jim Ross was a referee in Portland that time. But my God, don't be a slobber knocker. So,
I like it. And what did you say the Manny Hernandez dude's name was?
Al Madrill.
Yep. He looks like a swole up Gallagher, like Gallagher if he had worked out real hard. You know what I mean?
Like Hispanic Gallagher. after he's been pulled from a pond from drowning. Oh, yeah. My friend Bob's gonna get his feelings hurt. He's a big fan of Al Madrill. He's gonna hate that we was done on Al Madrill, but he's a good dude. But this wasn't, like I say, he's past his prime at this point. By 1989, Al's been around since, the late 70s. So he's getting towards the end of his career here. And
we'll return after these messages.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday at noon, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the Wrestlecopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the Wrestlecopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the Wrestlecopia Podcast Network, located over at Wrestlecopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the Wrestlecopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up and coming podcast brand, please consider making it Wrestlecopia.
In the second segment, we get Playboy Buddy Rose and his Rose Garden. He's accompanied by his pal, Colonel Debeers. So what a pair that the South African mercenary Colonel Debeers is out here with Playboy Buddy Rose, who's he's got his robe on. You can tell he's got leg warmers on. He's got a headband on. And he tells us that the fans that used to call him names like Porky and Tubby, but he has lost 60 pounds on the Playboy Buddy Rose diet. And he even has a pile of crap that shows us what 60 pounds look like that he lost, that he referred to as fat, that he left laying in the ring. I don't know about the Playboy Buddy Rose diet, but do you remember the blowaway diet when he went to the WWF about a year after this in 1990? And they did his bit where he was about another 60 or 70 pounds heavier by then than he was here. And he would pour freaking powder all over himself and sit in front of a fan and turn the fan on and blow fucking powder everywhere. It was supposed to be blowing away the weight. And of course, they would show a before and after picture of him blowing all the way. It was a funny, sketch. They were still jobbing him on TV, but at least he was featured in some kind of way. Here he takes off the robe. And he says he's wearing some large shorts, and he says he doesn't have to wear his fat boy shorts anymore. And he drops those shorts to reveal something akin to a Speedo that he's wearing. I don't think he's actually wearing a Speedo, Steve. I think it's just he's wearing trunks that used to fit him before he gained all this weight, and now they look like a Speedo. Nonetheless, he's like I said, he's got my headband. He's wearing leg warmers. He starts doing some pec exercises, and it says it's basically, this is a comedy segment, which Rose is good at. I don't know. What did you think of this whole thing? Does it feel like something you'd watched in Alabama?
No, I hated it. I mean, yeah, I'd have watched it in Alabama, but no, I felt like they were wasting time. But was he kissing the girl when they're doing the sit-ups?
Yes. That was the gimmick. It was motivating him to sit up to kiss the girl, who I think was his girlfriend at the time.
Yeah, I mean, surely. No, I didn't. It just droned on and on. But I mean, it works for the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's heat. I mean, Buddy had been around Portland forever, and he was getting bigger every time you saw him. Bless his heart. But I don't know. I was watching this, and I was like, I don't think Steve's gonna love this, even though he's known for comedy, ironically. But I don't think he's gonna love this. Like, then again, I could see, like, if Will Owens got really fat, I could see him out here doing this.
Will Owens could probably pull it off, but no, like I guess because I had seen Adonis and other people do kind of the same thing. It was I don't know, it wasn't as good to me.
Yeah, well, he did beat that whole correcting the announcer on his weight thing to death for years and years once he got overweight. But it's kind of funny, you can go back and look at him on WrestleMania 1 when he's the executioner, and it's hard to believe it's the same guy that you're watching here doing exercises. But so when we get our next match in the ring, we're seeing two baby faces square off in what the announcer referred to as a scientific match, as Art Barr takes on Rex King. So they have a nice little clean back and forth scientific match, and Art Barr eventually gets the win, and then he helps up Rex King, and they hug and all that good shit. But it turns out this is going to be the last match that we see Art Barr in for quite a while, Steve. But we'll hear more about that later, about what happens to Art Barr after his scientific match. Where are you at on? Okay, so the comedy thing did drone on. I agree with that. Where are you at on like maybe not even necessarily now, but say, the age you were in 89, if you'd been watching this then, how did you feel about scientific babyface matches?
I don't think I even understood it. You know what I mean? I don't think I even got what they were throwing out. I think I would be more complex. Like, why are they fighting? Why are they making these guys fight? You know what I mean?
Yeah. When I watched it through the first time, and before I went back and was making notes and stuff, I was watching it, and I'm like, why the fuck? This is boring. Like, why are we having this damn scientific match? Now, when they do the skit with Art Barr later in the show, you're like, okay, well, that match was to show that he was Mr. Clean Cut, and there's a couple opportunities where he could have went in for the kill, but he didn't because he's a nice guy and he doesn't have an edge to him and everything. And so now, a little bit later on, Roddy Piper is going to help give him that edge. And when we see him come back out later, he's a completely different guy, but we'll get to that. We returned from a break with a promo from the Pacific Northwest champion, the Top Gun. And if you had any doubt who this is under the mask, I mean, like, Top Gun clearly is Cuban, like he's definitely got an accent on him. But the Grappler makes his way out. And, I told you at the beginning of the show, Steve, that the Grappler, Len Denton, is booking the show.
Yeah.
But even if you didn't have that information, somebody like you that's been around the business, I think you can start figuring out that Grappler's booking the show, because we know he's wrestling for the tag team titles tonight. And now we're promoting he's going to be wrestling for the heavyweight title next Saturday night. So he's got 2 title matches in under a week. Plus, he's going to have this workout thing that he's challenging everybody to. He's all over the show here. I'm not complaining, because the Grappler's, he's good. But like I say, you can kind of tell sometimes if it's a wrestler that's booking. You can tell they're booking because they're just all over everything.
At the time, was he putting himself over, or is he giving chase? You know what I mean?
Back and forth. He was on top there and booking for quite a while, and he drew pretty well, and I think he knew when to lose anyway. He didn't just put himself on top and then stay there. So I think he lost when the time was right.
What belt is Top Gun?
He's the Pacific Northwest heavyweight champion.
Okay.
And what's funny is he wore it out to the ring for the first match. The announcer never mentioned it. Not a damn word that our heavyweight champion's in the ring right now. We don't find that out until he's out there for the interview, and then the announcer says, "Hey, he's still our Pacific Northwest champion." I'm like, wait a minute. When you say still the champion, are you saying the belt was on the line in the match that you never even mentioned he had the belt earlier?
Well, the quality's not great, and I thought at the first it was a NWA strap, and I was like, well, they didn't mention it because it's somebody else's strap.
Well, at this point, they were still I think technically part of the NWA, but that was that same type of plate that was just like the NWA TV title and the NWA national title and all that. Yeah,
universal belt for your area.
Around the 80s, like everybody had that kind of belt. So yeah, it's really hard to tell with grainy footage like that. There's no chance of looking at that knowing what it was. You're not going to be able to read it, obviously. So our next match, Abudha Dein, who was actually Rocky Iakea, son of King Curtis Iakea, who most people listening to this are most likely to remember King Curtis from those Dungeon of Doom segments in WCW in 95. He's the very large man with the very large scars in his forehead that Kevin Sullivan would go talk to. And he screamed and he talked. Every fucking thing he said, he was screaming. He'd been in WWF in like 87, managing Kamala and Sika the Samoan. But he actually had a pretty decent wrestling career back in his day down there in Florida and Hawaii and different places. And again, very big dude.
He had a good look too.
Yeah, I liked pardon me, trying not to cough again. But yeah, I liked this Abudha Dein. He's got the curly boots on, which always tells you, he's a heel and he's going to do something dastardly at some point.
So he's Prince Iakea's father. Do you remember Prince Iaukea?
That's the implication anyway.
Okay, but it's a work.
No, yeah, that guy just pulled that name out of his ass before he leaned into the Iaukea thing, and then he later leaned into the Prince thing, and I think we all remember that.
Yeah, we used to. We had a little kid one time looked like goddamn Rick Martel, and so we called him Martel.
Oh, there you go. I did think it was kind of funny though, because they were mocking Prince, and there was like he was the artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea. But then he dressed like Prince and came out to like a generic version of Purple Rain and all the shit.
It always bothered me that he was barefooted. Something about barefooted wrestlers just gives me the heebie-jeebies.
But to me, it was one of those things where it's kind of like a one-off joke, where it's like you imagine like Vince Russo, whoever it was at the time, like, bro, wouldn't it be funny if Prince Iaukea, if we dressed him like Prince and then we called him the artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea? Bro, it'd be sick. All right, well, it was funny that first night you did it, but now you're stuck with a fucking character name, the artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea, dressed like Prince, and you got to do angles with that.
And the gimmick, because didn't he have real frilly jackets and paint on his face? And
he dressed like Prince, and he had the chick who would eventually go on to be Booker T's wife as his, I think they called her Paisley because of Prince, and yeah, it was just a whole Prince gimmick, but it was all predicated on the joke that he used to be called Prince Ikea. But anyway, that's a whole other episode there. So he's taking on a gentleman by the name of Carl Styles, not Prince Ikea, Rocky Ikea, aka Abudha Dein here. He's taking on Carl Styles. Carl Styles, I remember seeing briefly in Memphis. He passed through Continental. He's just kind of a big muscle head that nobody really could figure out what the hell to do with. So here in Portland, he had this weird relationship with the Grappler, where the Grappler's pushing him around, and he's kind of the Grappler's flunky. And I feel like Scotty the Body witnessed this, made notes, because the Raven Stevie Richards relationship would mirror the Grappler Carl Styles relationship by the time they got to ECW in very many ways. And I feel like that's where Scott Levy got it from. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it anyway.
I'm sure.
This match felt like it lasted a fucking hour.
It was long.
Jesus Christ. It was terrible. I mean, I guess I couldn't say it's terrible, but it wasn't good. Like, it wasn't enjoyable. It was boring as shit. So when the finish finally came is when I'm just sitting there scratching my head, dude. The ref gets temporarily knocked out. So he kicks out. Carl Styles falls on top of the referee. Now the referee's seemingly knocked out. And Abudha Dein pulls out what the announcer refers to as brass knuckles. And I don't know about you, I can only assume that Styles was supposed to block the punch from the brass knuckles, but he doesn't. So he punches him with brass knuckles, and he essentially no-sells a punch from fucking brass knuckles, then blocks the second punch, and then he takes the knucks, and he hits Abudha Dein, but he hits him twice. Abudha Dein feeds up, gets hit a second time with fucking brass knuckles before the referee stands up, sees him, and disqualifies him. What the fuck?
Do you reckon that's what they said to each other in the back when it was over? Hey, man.
I mean, do you assume, like I do, that he was probably supposed to block that first shot? Surely the plan wasn't to take a punch from brass knuckles, no-sell it, block the second one. But then again, Abudha Dein took 2 punches from the brass knuckles and was getting ready to feed up again when the referee saw it. So I don't know.
When the referee calls it, he's still standing up, like arguing with the ref, like, he hit me with brass knucks or whatever. You should be out cold, night.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
One punch. So everything about that was just a fucking train wreck. And so I was like, man, we sat through this, and I know it was like probably about a 5 to 6 minute match that, like I said, felt like an Iron Man 60-minute match or something. I thought it was never going to end. So this leads us to the segment where, kind of as I was referring to before that match, the Grappler berates Carl Styles for losing. Art Barr decides to get involved and try to get Styles to take up for himself. But then Styles turns on Art Barr, hooks him in a full Nelson, allowing the Grappler to slap Barr in the face multiple times until Roddy Piper comes out, holds a lighter up to Styles' elbow that causes him to let go of the full Nelson. And then Piper and the Grappler go back and forth with this convoluted workout challenge next week. Piper says he's retired from wrestling. He doesn't fight anymore, but he does work out. So basically, they're telling us that he's going to have a confrontation with. Basically, it's their, I guess, what they considered a creative way to book Piper versus the Grappler, but not call it a match since Piper's technically retired. And I'm sure they wanted to save his return match, keep that in their back pocket for later, which he ended up doing in WWF anyway. I love Piper, and I'm a big fan of the Grappler. But this segment just didn't land for me. Like, I don't know. It all just felt like the insults they were given were kind of lame. And it's like, I don't know. It felt like 2 dudes on a playground or something. Or I don't know. How did you feel about it?
It's a lot of people, Gene, interfering in other people's business, which is a recipe for disaster on a wrestling program. And yeah, Piper robbed these people. Piper just come to their money, bro.
Yeah, it wasn't the best use of Roddy Piper here. And like you said, yeah, anytime you stuck your nose in my business in wrestling. It's always a problem. You don't want nobody sticking their nose in your business when you're a wrestler.
A lot of people on the show are sticking their nose in other people's business. I noticed that.
Yes, and the grappler ain't having none of it. You know, like you let me slap my flunky around and you mind your own business, damn it. Don't be trying to give him self-esteem, bullshit like that. But
Art Barr out there dressed like a candy cane.
Yeah. I was like, Art Barr, why are you sticking your nose in your, like, you do seem like a dipshit for getting involved in this. Hey,
Yeah.
man, where are you taking this? You're bigger than him. And next thing you know, your dumb ass is in a full Nelson getting slapped around. Like,
yeah.
I mean, Grappler's kind of got a point. You had no reason to be involved in this. You were sticking your nose out here. Business. You really should have the shit beat out of you right now instead of just getting like little light playful slaps to the face like foreplay or something. Like it wasn't even really threatening. Moving on, we get a video on the Southern Rockers that YouTube had muted the music, so it wasn't very exciting watching these guys lift weights and run around and do all this silly shit to absolute silence. But that's what we got. But no fault of Portland wrestling. That was a YouTube thing. So.
I felt bad for the Southern Rockers.
Yeah, you know, like Steve Dahl, again, he's another one, kind of like C.W. Bergstrom. He's in Memphis right now over on the USWA show. We're watching in 93. He's teaming with Rex King, honestly, who was, you know, the technical babyface earlier in this show. But by 93, he was a heel, and they're wearing singlets. They're thong singlets in USWA on top of, like, biker shorts, like, Josh probably just absolutely hates the outfits. Him and Richard are getting fighting mad about those outfits. I'm not a fan of them, but I'm just amused by how much, because I'm like, dude, they're working. Like, you guys are smart to the business and you're mad, so it's getting heat. You're like, oh, it's the wrong kind of heat. Like, no, there's not really a wrong kind of heat.
I like the kind of heat, and it's the Southern Rockers name. Like, here's another Rockers tag team, the Midnight, the Globetrotter Rockers, the Springtime Rockers, you know what I mean? Just
I remember when I saw that name in magazines, I'm like, really? Like, so the Midnight Rockers ripped off the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express. And now you guys are ripping off the Rockers, but you call yourself the Southern Rockers, but you're in Portland, Oregon, and they don't announce you as being from the South. So why are y'all the Southern Rockers? But by the time they get to USWA, King and Dahl are named Simply Divine with their thong singlets on. And then by the time they get to the WWF, they become Timothy Well and Stephen Dunn. Well done. Wow. What a freaking gimmick that was.
Well,
right now, they've just turned babyface in Memphis, but they're still wearing their thong outfits, and it's killing poor Josh and Richard. They're like, you can't be babyface wearing thong singlets. I'm like, but here they are.
They look like $1 million, though.
Oh, absolutely. So here we've got our Pacific Northwest Tag Team Championship match. The belts are held up. We've got the Grappler and Playboy Buddy Rose taking on Steve Dahl and Scott Peterson, which isn't Scott Peterson the dude that like killed
Lacey Peterson. That's right.
That's what I thought. Every time I said that name, I'm like, that sounds familiar. And then afterwards I was like laying in bed. I'm like, I think Scott Peterson's a murderer. I'm like, I wonder if it's the same dude. And then I looked it up, and it's not the same dude. So
totally different.
If you stop listening to the show because you're trying to Google to see if the Southern Rocker Scott Peterson's the murderer and Scott Peterson, they're two different guys. So don't worry about that. But pretty good tag team match here until Carl freaking Styles gets involved. This guy is just brings everything to a fucking halt when he shows up. And so Carl Styles and his ill-fated brass knuckles come into play once again, and he gets caught trying to throw the brass knuckles to the Grappler. So the Southern Rockers win by disqualification, and they're your new Pacific Northwest Tag Team Champions, because apparently in Portland, if the belts are held up, you can win the belts on a disqualification. That's fine. Not even going to sit and debate that one, man. We're going to move right on past that. New champs. So then we follow that with the very strangely executed segment that sees Art Barr come out, Roddy Piper comes out, and Roddy Piper says he's going to help Art Barr. And long story short, without explaining this step by step, and I guess if we'd have been able to pull a clip of this, we would have aired it right now. He turns Art Barr into Beetlejuice. Yes, that Beetlejuice, not the black midget from the Howard Stern show. He turned him into the Michael Keaton character from the movie Beetlejuice. By having him change clothes behind a sheet and then pour powder in his hair and rub black shit around his eyes. And now he is Beetlejuice. This felt like a coke-induced fever dream or some shit. I couldn't believe this was an actual segment on a wrestling show, even in 1989 in Portland.
This was silly and it didn't need to happen. He could have just tagged with him. They didn't have to go to extremes like this to tell that he was riding with Roddy Piper. I kind of thought they were already going to wrestle because of what happened before.
I thought, like, before the tag team title match, you could have just had, or after the whole little skirmish earlier with Carl Styles, Piper could have threw his arm around Art Barr and like, hey, buddy, I'm going to help you, and then take him to the back, and then he could have just emerged later as Beetlejuice. Like, did we need this to happen on camera of them? He's taking his boots off and he's taking his pants off and he hands his underwear over the freaking thing and he's pouring powder in his hair and all this shit. Like, we didn't need to see, like, none of that was necessary, but we saw it because Portland, I guess. I don't know, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, the podcast that's based on the old school but can still help you find the good stuff from today. Jimmy Street and the Plastic Chic, Jared, are the undisputed tag team champions of the wrestling podcast world. From thought-provoking topics to superstar interviews to action figure expertise. This team does it all, and all they ask is, give me back my pro wrestling! Every other Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at Wrestlecopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
Do you think they were like, we've got to tell this part of the story? You know what I mean? Like, this is an intricate part that needs to be.
I feel like, so Piper had worked for Portland Wrestling back before he made it to the WWF. Like, he insisted on, going back and work. Anytime he wasn't working for the WWF and he wasn't busy making a movie, he would go to Portland for Don Owen. Well, he lived in Portland for that matter, but he would work shows for Don Owen in Portland. And so he had kind of carte blanche. He's a huge name. So he just kind of had carte blanche to show up and just do whatever he wanted to do. Because eventually Len Denton worked for him outside of Portland Wrestling. Roddy took some of his money and opened a transmission shop in Portland, and Len Denton ran the transmission shop for Roddy Piper. Wow. It was called Piper's Pit Transmission Shop, and then the Grappler ran it, but yet they were at odds on television.
Oh, of course.
Go figure. So I assume that like Roddy come in, whatever he was on that night, like, oh, I got a great idea. We're going to turn this Art Barr kid into Beetlejuice. It's going to be amazing, you know. And they're like, all right, well, how are you going to do that on camera? Like, you're wanting to change this up. Oh, we'll hold a sheet up over him. It'll be great. It'll be great. That just felt like this was all something he wanted to do, and nobody could talk him out of it. So they're just like, all right, fuck, I guess we're doing this. Like, make sure you bring the sheet out there so he's not balls naked out there on TV.
You're Art Barr, and now you got to do this flop. How psyched are you? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Then we want you to start grabbing people and kissing them, and this and that. And,
yeah. Like, well, good news is you're not going to have to wear those candy cane pants anymore. However, it's going to get a lot worse.
Get you a new look, kid.
Strangely, a year later, he would get signed by WCW to do this character, but of course they couldn't do the name Beetlejuice in WCW, so they called him the Juicer. But unfortunately, he had some statutory rape charges floating around at the time, and somebody called TBS, was like, hey, you know, you got an underage rapist on your hands there, and they quickly released him. Because
if I had a nickel for every time a statutory rape charges held me back from getting a job, Gene, I'd have a Santa Claus sack full of nickels. Damn statutory rape charges always popping their head up.
People just don't have a sense of humor about that like they used to. You know, used to back in the day, like, it's not actually, it's statutory. It's not really, you know.
It's not real rape.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I know that's what I know. You've always told people that's what kept you out of the WWF and the Attitude Era. It's why Bischoff canceled your WCW contract, was all those
statutory
allegations.
rape.
You got Me Too'd like 20 years before it was popular. So,
oh man,
unfortunate. So then we go to a 2 out of 3 falls match with Colonel Debeers facing the Golden Boy, Mike Golden from Georgia. Although here they didn't call him Golden Boy Mike Golden, they called him Golden Boy Golden, is what the announcer says. They go at it for not very long, a few minutes here. Debeers hits his pedigree-ish move, gets a win. We go to a commercial break. We see a promo from, I think, the Grappler. And for some reason, when we come back, Beetlejuice shows up for the second fall, and he takes on Colonel Debeers in the second fall, which, I mean, I get it. We're trying to prove that Art Barr has changed. He's not this nice little scientific wrestler we saw earlier in the show. Now he's, you know, went back there and snorted a couple lines with Roddy Piper, and he's on a fucking bender now, and he's apparently Beetlejuice from the movie we all saw. Tim Burton movie, I guess you would say. But, you know, again, I remember reading about this character in magazines back in the day. I didn't get to watch this till way later, but I just remember reading it in magazines and reading a description of that segment that we just talked about. And I remember as a kid reading it thinking, man, that sounds kind of stupid. But I wasn't prepared for just how terrible it was until I actually got to see it. And, oh, boy, was it. It's something, but it's honestly why I picked this episode, because I was like, all right, let's watch this. Let's see what Steve has to say about it. And, we'll go through it.
Well, I mean, it's not much different than Flying Brian, right?
I mean, how so?
I mean, he was trying to be like he was off the rails. I don't know. I guess he was kind of being Beetlejuice more.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but I mean, Flying Brian, like, nobody stripped him down and made him change clothes and poured baby powder in his head and painted his face and gave him a goofy name from a movie. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't know, he ended up getting over in Portland. He actually drew him, you know, some good houses, and then he made some money there. So, you know, what do we know about anything? But quick promo from the new tag team champions, the Southern Rockers, and that is going to be it for this episode of Portland Wrestling. I know we've moved through it pretty fast because we didn't show any clips or any pictures, and we didn't really get too deep in the weeds on the matches. But as you may or may not know, Steve, here on this program, I have added the same element to it that I use for the USWA podcast, where at the end, I asked my co-host some questions about the episode. So right now, let's take a moment and let me ask you a couple of questions about this episode. So we always start with, and this might be a tough one today. This might be tougher than usual. What was your least favorite part of this Portland wrestling show you watched?
Probably the promo with the juicer comes out.
Yeah,
the Beetlejuice guy.
Well, see, here's the thing. I almost want to say that, but it had an odd, somewhat level of entertainment to it, even though it wasn't good, but it was a curiosity to watch. Mine, if I'm getting asked, my least favorite part of the show was that never-ending Abudha Dein versus Carl Styles match, because there was just really no redeeming factor to it. So then you think, well, this better have a good finish, and then the finish was just a total shit show.
Garbage. Yeah, that was a trash match.
So this may be the toughest question of all. I don't know. I didn't really realize until we were going through it. I'm like, ooh, I don't know what you're going to pick for this. Second question, what was your most favorite part of this show?
Probably the Rose Garden, but I liked it like you like to hate shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it was, and I kind of feel bad for him. Like he had to go out there and do that, not just once. He probably did that a bunch of nights.
Oh, don't feel bad for Buddy. That was his idea. He wanted to do that shit. He wasn't nobody twisted his arm to do that. He came to the WWF and pitched him the whole blow-away diet. Like he brought that with him.
But no, I like the Rose Garden. I thought that was pretty funny.
I agree. And see, you threw me for a loop there, because earlier when we was going over it, you're like, nah, it's too long. I didn't really care for it. So I thought, all right.
No, it was a way. I feel like they were trying to waste time. And I think that's why I was into it, because I wanted to see how long he would go. What else could he do? You know what I mean?
About halfway through that Abudha Dein match, I was like, man, I wish Buddy Rose would have did push-ups longer or some shit. Like,
you reckon if he had went longer on the Rose Garden, they'd have cut out that Abudha Dein? Was this live back in the day? Were they
live to tape? But I mean, they had time to. They tried not to, but they could edit if they had to.
Oh, okay, I got you.
If you're going to be like a serious answer, I guess I enjoy the Rose Garden, but I mean, I guess I liked the tag team match, but I didn't love the finish, and I didn't love like them winning the tag belts on a disqualification. But you know, It is what it is. So the number 3 question, and this will be an interesting answer to hear: did this show make you want to watch any more Portland wrestling moving forward?
Yes, but I'm a sick freak. You know what I mean? I could watch that all the time. My girlfriend would hate it, but yeah, I would watch all the.
And to be fair, a lot of these territories were, in the process of dying in 89. So a lot of the territory stuff you watch, by the time you watch it in like 88, 89, 90, it's pretty tough to watch. But if you go back and watch some Portland from like 82, 3, 4, pretty much up through about 86, you'll find some really good stuff. 87 is when it starts going downhill, in my opinion.
Oh, really? I didn't think I would, because when I was first starting to watch it and they had the commercials in there, I was like, oh, there's commercials. But then I was like, oh, there's commercials from 1989. You could get a camcorder that was the size of a table for $1,000. VHS straight to your VCR.
Tom Peterson's this week. Yeah.
But
yeah, dude, like I used to sit like during COVID, like I got oddly like nostalgic, and I would go find like video compilations on YouTube that was nothing but like old 80s and 90s commercials like that, and just sit and watch them. So I kind of get giddy when I watch these old shows, like not so much the later 90s stuff, but anything from like the 80s. And it's got commercials. I'm like, oh yeah, if nothing else, the commercials are going to be entertaining. So
I'm the same way. I'll watch those 2-hour blocks of old commercials.
Yes.
And surprisingly, I think I'll know a bunch of the commercials. There's a ton that I'm like, I don't remember none of this, bro.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of it I vividly remember, and as soon as I hear the music, I'm like, oh, there it is, like right in the back of my head. And there's other stuff I'm like, that happened, like this, and then I'll watch 2 or 3 episodes of something, and it'll be on there numerous times, and it's shows that I watched back then. So I'm like, okay, I saw this, but I have no recollection of it whatsoever. So it's like my mind completely blocked out some things, and then other things it locked down in there that immediately sprang to mind as soon as I heard it. So I don't know. It's weird how your mind works.
What happens to the footage? Because in '89, that was probably some high definition footage, you know?
Yeah. Well, what happens is most of this footage comes from tape traders who have, it's pre-DVD days. So this is like a 10th generation VHS recording, where that was the downside of tape trading back in the day, because I got in on the tail end of tape trading. I actually traded tapes for about 4 years before it got predominantly DVDs. And so if somebody would make your copy directly from a master tape, it looked great. But what would happen is people would trade for a 3rd or 4th generation copy, and then they would make you a copy of their 5-time copied copy. And by the time you get it, it looks like what this episode did, and sometimes even worse. And then people throws those up on YouTube.
See, that's interesting in itself, the tape trading days. See, I heard about it, but I didn't never do none of that stuff. Were you ever watching a tape you had traded out or whatever, and there's a piece of somebody's wedding or a piece of a funeral or a piece of a graduation or something, or porn?
Never anybody's personal. Yes, I was about to say, now numerous times, like, you know, WCW Saturday Night would end, and all of a sudden, and it was like kicks into some porn. And then the next show, because people will take those 6-hour tapes and they record, you know, 3 or 4 different shows on them, depending on how long they were. So, you know, you'd have that, you know, you look at old tapes from back then, there'd be a break in the middle, like this show ends, and then all of a sudden the porn that was on there originally fades in, and then it goes back to whatever your next show was.
Yeah, there'd be like a little snippet of whatever was on there before.
And sometimes, you know, you're like, well, hey, let's see where this is going. And now all of a sudden fucking wrestling's back on, and you're like, oh, well, shit.
Okay. When I remember when I first got my first apartment, I worked with this dude, and I had a satellite dish, and like, not a lot of people, I mean, everybody had one, but you know what I'm saying? I had all the channels because I was a grown up. So I was like, give me I want the porn channels. And a buddy of mine at work would buy these 6-hour VCR tapes. And he was like, will you record me the porn? And I used to giggle because I would record like the very beginning of a porn and then like 4 or 6 hours of Coach. And I'd give it to him like it was porn, and I'd be like, here you go, buddy. And of course you'd have to wait till the next day, and he'd be like, hey man, it was like 2 minutes of porn and like 4 hours of Coach. And I used to giggle with him sitting at home fast forwarding through all them Coach episodes.
Oh, you know, yeah, sitting there Pete in hand, fast forwarding through Coach for 4 fucking hours.
And I did it several times till he was finally like, just give my tapes back, I don't want no porn.
That's a good rib right there, dude. I like that. That's because what would be funny is if you just record it right up to the point that they're about to fuck, and then you just cut it off, and then it's Coach for a little bit, and then it starts another one, and he's like, okay, here it goes.
I'm
it's
such
the same
a
bit. You get the very beginning and get right to where the shit's about to go down, and then it cuts off again. And
well, there was one on YouTube. It was a video, and it was an actual porn because I was watching it, and I was like, holy shit, this is the actual porn I've seen before. And it starts out, and right before they're going to show you anything, it's like some headbanger dude, and he was like, that's a sin. Now you watch My Little Pony, and it starts into a whole ass episode of My Little Pony with the theme song. And I remember it looked kind of like a Rickroll, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And you were like, well, this is going to be tough, but I think I can work with this actually.
No, my dumbass fast forwarded through the My Little Pony to see if they were for sure. Are you for sure? You're for sure
That's
not going to show no porn?
I like that version better of the story than you're like, yeah, you know, I wasn't a big fan of My Little Pony, but it got it done. But anyway, so there you go, folks. There's your review of Portland wrestling from January 21st, 1989. And like I say, moving forward, the show is going to drop back to, maybe monthly. There may be some months we work to a minute. So let me just depend on how I can work around all this other stuff I've got going on. But I do have some interviews that I want to do that I'm just trying to get dates set with people when we can. As you well know, man, these damn podcasts, the biggest challenge is just getting everybody together. That's why I like these where it's just me and one other person, because you can kind of work that out. But dude, these ones where I've got 3 and 4 people and you got to get everybody on the same page, it's quite the challenge. It can be more trouble than it's worth sometimes.
I can imagine the editing. Ugh.
Oh yeah. So anyway, got some interviews lined up. We're going to do some more reviews, some different things. So keep checking in and keep checking the channel. We're going to keep the content coming. We're going to keep the content coming over there on the Patreon. So if you got something you'd like to see on Patreon, let us know. I'll do my best to try to make that happen. But in the meantime, make sure you go and check out all the great stuff, man. Here lately, we have been uploading. There's plenty of old Portland, older than this. I uploaded some stuff from like 1980, 1983. We've got 1984 Georgia Championship Wrestling we've put up recently, some 83 Memphis, some AWA from 1984, some house show matches from Mid-South from 1984. They're really good stuff. Got a bunch of 85 stuff we're getting ready to upload. So if you like old school wrestling, especially from the 80s, you're come to the right place. Subscribe to the channel. Keep an eye out because we got new stuff coming all the time. So, Steve?
I got bootleg porn and coach videos. If anybody, holler at your boy.
Yeah, you've already spoiled the finish now. They know what's coming. So
no doubt.
Then again, it's 2024. Some people might be into that, honestly. That might be some folks' new fetish.
No doubt.
Start with that and finish with old Hayden T. Fox.
Always.
All right, Steve. Thanks for joining me, man. It's been great, and we'll do it again as soon as we can.
Thank you, man. Y'all have a good one.
For another episode of Retro Wrestling with Gene Jackson. Thanks.